Hi everyone, Will Critchlow here from Search Pilot. We have something a little different for you this week. I'm actually out of the office, and so we couldn't record the normal conversations that we bring to you on this feed, and we didn't want you to miss out on the insights and interesting conversations that we've been having. So we are rebroadcasting a conversation that I had with Patrick from Sitebulb and Caitlin from JD Finish Line that went out on Sitebulb's feed recently. If you missed it, here's a chance to catch up with what I thought was a really interesting conversation. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Sitebulb webinar today, where we'll be talking about the future of e-commerce SEO and how it is shifting as we move towards agentic commerce. I'm Patrick, CEO and co-founder of Sitebulb, and I'll be your host today. Sitebulb helps in-house and agency teams get to grips with technical SEO on e-commerce sites of all shapes and sizes, including some of the most well-known retail sites on the planet. And we have two amazing guests on our panel today who are very well versed in e-commerce. So please welcome Caitlin Geary and Will Critchlow. So a little bit of housekeeping before we start. Everybody all the time asks if we're recording the session. The answer is always yes. So anyone who signed up will get the recording emailed to them tomorrow, courtesy of Jojo, who you will see already in our chat. And we also always say 15 minutes at the end of the discussion for Q&A. So please put your questions in the little Q&A box on the left of the chat bit, not in the chat, which again, everyone always does. And we always have to tell you, go and put it in the Q&A. And then at the end of the session, we will be basically showing on screen and asking our panel the most upvoted questions. So if you haven't got any questions yourself, still check out the Q&A because there might be some in there that you are also interested in. And if you can upvote them as well, then we tend to work from the upvoted down. So thank you everybody for joining. So let's get into it and meet our guests. So we have Caitlin Geary. She has direct experience growing multi-million-dollar e-commerce sites in her role managing the SEO at JD Finish Line. And Will Critchlow's company Search Pilot worked with some of the biggest retailers on the internet, literally proving what works and what doesn't with SEO split testing. So, Will, everyone talks about SEO AI search as if it kills SEO. From e-commerce, what has actually changed in the last 12 months and what still has not?
Well, firstly, thank you for organizing this, Patrick. Great to be here, and thank you for including me. I heard a great comment in one of our feedback forms the other day where somebody described AI search or GEO or whatever you want to call it as basically SEO but with more panic. And I quite like that description. There's a lot of executive attention and leadership focus, and suddenly the boardroom's interested in search in a way that hasn't really been true for decades. And I can't speak for everyone, but I'm pretty excited about that. I also think it's great that there's some competition for Google, even though Google seems to be playing pretty well at the moment, and that innovation is exciting. But we're in the early days. I think the biggest thing I would say is remember, regular search is still bigger. Google is still your biggest channel, your biggest AI channel, even though we've seen the explosive growth in all of these kind of chat-based platforms. But that's kind of the status quo. We're seeing the explosive growth, so it's all going to change. And so I think the big thing that I'm talking to teams about right now is that forward-looking thing that, a 2026 click or a 2028 click is not the same thing as a 2021 or a 2023 click, in the sense that people have probably done a lot more research and been told a lot more information before they ever get to your site. And that's the thing that I'm really focusing on.
So would you say then that not a lot has actually changed in the last 12 months and it's more of a future focus thing?
I would say that is probably true in the actual kind of button pressing sense, what keys do you hit on the keyboard sense.
Mm-hmm.
The thing, Mike King had a great way of framing this though, which was the exact same activity could be in other industries, could be PR, could be outbound sales, could be link building, right? You're sending emails to persuade somebody about a story that you're talking about. And in the same way, SEO and GEO can have different purposes, different goals, different objectives. At a very tactical level, we are now running experiments in what we call multi-metrics mode for where there's enough. So for folks who are customers of ours who have enough traffic where you can independently run experiments on LLM traffic and separate it out from regular search traffic, we're now able to measure the net combined effect as well as breaking it down by regular SEO and GEO. And we have seen our first examples of hypotheses that apply to one and not the other, or are even positive for one and negative for the other. So, they're definitely not exactly the same thing, but the majority of the activity is still looking the same in my experience.
Should we be expecting case studies and research
100%
papers?
you should be expecting case studies. If we haven't published case studies soon, then send somebody around to my house and have a word.
Nice. And then Caitlin, have you got any from your side working actually within a retailer, is there anything that you've seen change in the last 12 months?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the main, like if I had to put it in a nutshell, there's two things. It's the shift from page to product, as I kind of alluded to in a previous response to Sitebulb, speaking about entities versus URLs, and then a shift from keyword to conversation. And I think that's not only in AEO, AI search, GEO, that's across SEO as well, right? We've been looking at search intent versus just straight keyword. So I think with AI, it's leaning more heavily into that. And like I said, joining that conversation. So it's less, I don't want to say it's not about optimizing your pages. Like by no means, that's one of the caveats I want to set ahead of all of this. This is not, at least for me and what I'm getting from Will and Patrick as well, like this is not mission abandon traditional SEO and like put all your eggs in the GEO basket. That would be a travesty. If that's something that you're trying to do, like good for you. Drop your name in the comments and I will follow you on LinkedIn. But I think maintaining that foundational traditional SEO, so making sure, crawlability, indexability, and making sure that your sites are fast, those types of things, you can't forsake those. You have to start there. And then from there is where the process kind of changes, looking at how do you join the conversation? What are people asking? What are the pain points there? And then focusing less on page specific optimizations, but rather entire entity optimizations and helping AI understand the whole scope of what a product is, right? Not just these are red shoes, but answering all of those queries that are going to reduce friction in the customer journey.
So that, the search pilot study you're talking about, let me just drop that in the comments actually, because everyone watching basically needs to go ahead and read that, because there's loads and loads of really valuable stuff in there. So like I think you mentioned in the quote that you put in was AI systems reason over product entities, not URLs, which you were just talking about there. So does that change what you're doing day to day?
It does. I think the primary, so let me start with a little anecdote. My boss had our entire team do like one of those strengths finder activities where you fill out the quiz and you find what your strengths are. So I got back my results. I was really surprised. I was thinking something like competitive or applicator or something like that. I was actually developer, and that's not in the technical sense. That's more in terms of developing relationships. So I'm someone who really likes to bring people in on projects. I like to collaborate. I don't like when people feel left out. So for me at first, I was like, yikes, that's not really necessarily how I feel in the workplace. Not that I don't want to include people, but sometimes I can be heads down, super in the zone and focus. So relationship building doesn't seem like it's at the forefront for me. However, now that we're leaning into this whole entity creation and understanding, that cross collaboration with other teams is extremely important. And so now I'm kind of in this space where I'm like, hey, I'm thriving here. I love being a developer because we have to reach out to teams that we may not normally work with. For example, like our paid team and managing our feeds, right? We need to make sure that all of our attributes are filled in. So you can't just say like Google Merchant Center, that's on our paid team, that's PLAs. Like you need to integrate. You need to be part of that vetting process to make sure that each product, every single attribute, do not skimp. So in that sense, like working with the paid teams, you need to have an ownership of GMC and the feeds that are being produced. A little bit more upstream, working with your merchandising team and seeing, what are they entering in the PIM? Is it coordinated between what the attributes they're including and the attributes that are being included in Merchant Center? So overall, it's just really this, I think the place where we need to start, and I'm trying to start, is with that cross collaboration and relationship building to say, hey, this is a team effort, like across the entire organization, to build this entity that is recognized and trusted within AI search. And so for me, that's really the foundation. The foundational change is less about the actual strategies and tactics, but more about getting the buy-in and the relationship building to say, you are contributing to how we appear in AI search. You're contributing, you're contributing, you're contributing. How do we all get together and make sure that we're on the same page? And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is getting out of your AEO, GEO, SEO lingo and figuring out how to connect with other teams. Because, I can talk about building an entity, I can talk about products over pages. What does that mean to a merchandising team? Maybe not a lot. So sometimes it's the type of thing, you take them to ChatGPT, you take them to Claude, whatever it is, you search whatever it is and show them right there on the screen, here's what's going on, here's what we're trying to achieve, and here's where you can come in to help with that visibility. So yes, the tactics will change, but I think the first thing that teams need to focus on is that cross-functional collaboration.
Yeah, I love that. I think as well, because obviously it's like the hot topic and everyone's talking about it, and you can literally show people like what happens. It perhaps allows you the buy-in that maybe we couldn't get previously, because it was more, oh, it's SEOs doing their thing over here, and it's also siloed.
Yeah, and I think it's an exciting time for SEOs too, because as Will alluded to, like there's this sense of panic, I think, and I think SEOs can channel that and make it exciting and turn it into an opportunity. So when everyone else in the organization is looking around for answers, like what are we supposed to do? I'm seeing case studies on this. I'm seeing these posts on LinkedIn. Like this is the opportunity for SEOs to rise up and say, hey, if you have a question, if you have a problem, come to me. We're actively researching and tracking these things, and we can help guide whatever questions you have. And so that's one thing, like I hope that anyone who's watching and takes away, whether you're an SEO or just within your marketing org, like you be the person to stand up and advocate for the direction of GEO, AEO, whatever your strategy is, but make yourself the authority there, because we really need to drive. And all of you are here because you are doing the legwork to lay this foundation and figure out this kind of like primary research. So you should be the expert in this space. So instead of panicking, look at this as an opportunity to be the one that like stands up on the soapbox and says, hey, everyone, come with me. I'm tracking, I'm testing, like, let's go together.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so let's think a bit more technically then. So if a retailer could improve one thing this quarter for AI discovery, and let's pick, so that could be product data completeness, the crawlability or accessibility of content, or brand authority. So only let's pick one thing. Where would you put the budget? Well, you go.
I'm going to pick the complete information completeness
Mhm.
with a little caveat, if I can put an asterisk on, of the crawlability if that's the biggest block, if it's kind of blocked or completely unavailable, which I'm assuming they've got kind of SEO basics in place, but the biggest difference is the JavaScript execution. And so I think if you want to be visible in these, particularly the real-time fetching from things like ChatGPT, then your stuff needs to be available even without JavaScript enabled. But if we're not in that kind of asterisk caveat, then I'm going to say more information. And that's the sneak preview hint of where some of the testing that we've been doing has been going is either summarizing information, additional information, or repurposing content in a way that's more digestible for an LLM. Those are the kinds of things that I would be experimenting with. And on brand, I'm going to say all of these things should be experiments, because it's all just changing so fast and nobody really actually has a clue what's working today or what's going to continue working.
I feel like you just somehow managed to swerve around saying it depends in a very clever way.
I mean, that's my whole job. But
This isn't
but
your
let's
first
have to find
rodeo.
out what the answer is, shall we, in each individual situation?
Caitlin, do you have a different take? Would you put the budget in a different place?
Will took the words right out of my mouth. I think like step 0 is just checking to make sure that your content is rendering server side, or at least is not completely hidden. Obviously, every single page can't fully render server side, but making sure those key components are visible to AI search. Like, do not do anything else. After you get off this call, after you get out of this webinar, go check your website and make sure that's going to be visible to AI bots, because you can do all kinds of amazing content optimization, structured data, everything you need to have like this fully functioning, conversion machine. But if none of that is visible, what's it all for? So start with step 0, which is making sure your content is visible to AI bots.
Yeah, which is basically the tech SEO bit. And if you need help with that, go and look in the comments, because Jojo has just put a couple of resources of our JavaScript SEO training and tech SEO in the AI era training in there as well, which will help with both of those pieces.
If you don't mind, Patrick, I've got one resource I would drop in there
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
go for
So
it.
if people want some of those, we're talking about kind of enhancing product pages and adding more or different kinds of content to them. My colleague Demetria actually did a webinar on it recently. I'll drop the link in the chat. And it's positioned as being about testing content produced using AI, but actually there's also quite a few hypotheses in there that are designed to be measured for their impact on AI discovery and GEO. So if folks are interested in some specific test examples or hypotheses, they can check that out.
Well, I feel that is like basically what my next question was anyway. So
Great segue.
I was going to ask you, Will, to put your search pilot hat on and let us know what you would say is like serious AI discovery test backlog would look like today.
Yeah. So with the caveat that I mentioned earlier, that it's all kind of in flux. So you're going to want to test and retest. And, I can't tell you the exact perfect prioritization because we're finding different things work in different situations. But some things that we've been experimenting with. One is reformatting content. So turning product specs into a kind of key features content piece, for example, adding more authoritative introductory paragraph on PLPs. You might notice all of these could be SEO hypotheses as well. Buying guide Q&A is quite an interesting one. A lot of freshness stuff. So one of the key things that the LLMs go out to the web for is up-to-date information. If you think about, they've got their training data, and then they've got everything that's happened since they were trained, and that is from the retrieval augmented generation, the RAG stuff, and that's where they're going to the search results themselves. They're doing that because they don't know up to the minute pricing information, in stock status, latest reviews, product drops, etc. And so showing that your content is fresh in those ways and having the freshest and latest information both on the page and highlighted on the page is kind of key kind of things to test. And then there's a lot of debate and discussion about structured data and schema. It's hard to tease apart what's good for what, because obviously, as I said, all these things are SEO hypotheses as well. Some of the ways that you can have an impact in AI discovery is by ranking better in regular search and showing up in the RAG. But all of these things put together, I think, tied in with what Caitlin was saying before about entities, not just URLs. Obviously, one of the things that connects entities and URLs is structured data. And I think, I would be testing new content freshness, richness, freshness indicators, and structured markup would be my kind of top ideas.
Nice. And then, so Caitlin, then, if you were going to take any of those ideas, which ones do you think would sort of survive most inside a large retail organization? Like, would you get pushback on any of them, or would you be able to any of those work more easily than others?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is to try to pursue initiatives where workflows already exist, because again, like I find this is going to be a foundational year in terms of, again, that relationship building, cross-functional collaboration, determining what's the shared language to ensure that we're all on the same page, aiming for the same goals. Um, so leveraging the workflows that you already have. So, for me, like Will saying, the structured data, like that's my new word. That server-side rendering last year was my power word that I just leaned on. This year it's going to be structured data, schema. Like, I'm all in for that. So I think for me, like, a specific example would be collaborating with our paid team and really making sure that our structured data exactly matches what is in our merchant center feeds. Um, I've had experience previously where the feeds and the structured data did not match, and it is a nightmare. And it's not a fun process to go through. It's very technical and nitty gritty, but you have to do it. It's foundational SEO, but it is also the thing that you need to have consistent messaging as you build your reputation and as you build yourself as an entity in AI search. So if your on-site structured data varies from what the merchandising team is entering in the PIM to what is in Google Merchant Center, that's a mismatch. That's going to signal a little bit of mistrust there. So testing in terms of what's going to stick, work with the teams that you already have connections with and unlock opportunities there. Teams that you may not be as closely connected with, I'd say use this year to, again, build those foundations. But if you want some immediate kind of traction or that buy-in that might not get too much pushback and is probably more easily understood, lean into the partnerships and workflows that you already have. And I think that's how how some of that testing will more easily get buy-in and survive in bigger organizations.
Awesome. Cool. All right. So we've talked a little bit about being discovered by AI, but what about using AI yourselves? So what things could retailers be doing using AI themselves in ways that would genuinely help customers beyond just sort of manufacturing like more content?
I think.
I'll
Oh,
go for
sorry.
it.
Go ahead, Will.
No, you go ahead.
Um, I I'm all about using AI for content creation, and I'm not going to say that we should shy away from it. But if we're thinking about ways to use it to benefit the customer beyond content creation, um, I think there's a huge opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to reduce friction. So what are the pain points that customers are experiencing as they go through the purchase journey? And can you answer those questions either right before or right at the point of purchase? So for example, you can do prompt tracking, see what people are asking about specific products. You can go in Search Console and do some sort of regex for longer tail queries to find what people are searching for at the product level and include those like maybe directly on your PDP. So it's not just those typical, like, it's this material, it's this color, and it's this brand. So maybe you should size down a size. Like, that's generic. That's not going to be helpful most of the time. People do want to know those things. But again, you're dealing with real people here, and you need to answer the questions that they have that are potentially preventing them from converting on your site. Maybe they're going to go to another site where those specific questions, like, are these good running shoes for someone with flat feet? Beyond just like, are these quality running shoes? Are these comfortable? So I think there's a huge opportunity to track where those pain points and points of friction are, and to use AI to answer those questions and kind of enhance your product description and product details on those pages.
I love that. Well, you were about to start, so you must have.
Yeah, I've only not a great deal to add. The two things my mind went to were, one was to separate the two kind of use cases that Caitlin's talking about there. One is kind of AI in like active mode, I guess, as in, the user is doing something and AI is doing something for them in the moment, right? So whether that's answering Q&A or customer service type stuff, or something about their journey, or whatever it might be, but where the AI is like kind of active in the session, is a different thing, obviously, to producing content or some kind of offline static batch process with the AI. Both have their place. For the first one, I just remember there's a thing that has come up a lot in the kind of more like the programming and engineering and kind of company building space, which is called the bitter lesson. I don't know if everybody's heard about this. This is the idea that the foundation labs, right? So the big models, the Anthropics, the OpenAIs, the Googles, have essentially overtaken all of the specialized point solution models. So the bitter lesson is that there's so far been limited value in trying to build some kind of super specialized trained model to do just specifically your thing, right? I don't know, like you're saying, what size of this is going to fit my body type or something. You might think you need to develop some kind of custom model that you train, and you figure out how to train on all of your own proprietary information. And the bitter lesson is most of the people who've tried this, whether it's in legal tech or health tech or wherever it's been, have found that actually, the answer is wait 6 weeks and the basic model from the Frontier Lab can just do it. So I think one of the things we've been trying to internalize a lot in our use of AI is to make sure that we can stay up to date with the cutting edge model. So make sure that we're not building so much on top of it that we can't upgrade the model underneath it every time there's a new state of the art model that comes out. On the other piece, so the AI generated content, I think we were alluding earlier, I think everybody's mentioned the case studies on LinkedIn, or the people talking about the crazy things that they've had. Obviously, people are only talking about their wins. I think some of those are going to be short-lived, and if it feels like a shortcut and a hack, it's probably not going to last. Where I think it is particularly interesting is where it's driving off your proprietary information and data. So whether that's reviews that people have given you specifically, whether it's product information, testing information that you have built up over time, that is unique to you. It's back to that kind of unique content type language, but taking that and presenting it in ways that are useful and meaningful to your visitors. That's where I think the value gets really interesting, because there are things that are genuinely, as a user, for example, I love the summary of reviews that you get on like Amazon, for example, now. And sometimes that can be either example. That can be, I can chat with the reviews, so I can say, has anybody tried this for a small cat type thing, or it can be the more static, just description of content, which obviously could be indexable. So that were just a couple of thoughts that I had there.
Yeah, I really like the summarizing of reviews. Although I wish they would also do it on the negatives as well, because you kind of have to go and hunt that. And you're like, well, actually, what did people say in negative? And sometimes it's like the product didn't arrive on time, and you're like, well, you've given it a 1 star, and that's not actually helpful. You could helpfully summarize the negatives as well, but no one seems to do that.
Yeah, I bet if they did a bit of like user experience tracking on those pages, you'd see the first thing people do is go and find the 2 1-star reviews and just check out what they were.
See what they are, yeah. Okay, so then just in terms of like measurement, so traffic is already becoming a weaker signal. So what then do we show leadership instead? Like what are good early indicators and real business outcomes? Caitlin, I'm going to throw this one to you first.
Okay. Well, I think if anyone has the locked down answer to that, reach out to me, because I would also like to know. So still kind of developing that, but I think one of the most important things, and I'm a huge advocate for, is expectation setting, right? So start having conversations now with leadership and people inside your organization about this exact thing. Like conversation is traffic is an eroding metric, right? I think it kind of has been since AI overviews. And just let people know things are changing. And if you don't have the answers yet for what you or your organization needs to track, that's fine. Maybe that's an opportunity to collaborate with leadership and say, okay, have them explain to you what they're interested in seeing out of AI search. And then you can kind of use your skills to deduct, okay, what possible metric can I put to that? So I think for us, it's kind of citation rate, Share of citation is definitely one. And then looking at not necessarily, well, of course, how frequently our brand is mentioned, but how accurate is the information that is being presented with our brand. So those are kind of, I guess, at least now a little bit intangible. But again, if you set those expectations in terms of, I've seen a lot of charts of like, this was the metric in 2023, and this is what it's going to be in 2027 or whatever. And so communicating those types of things, I think are super important. But I think in terms of like ultimate business goals in ecom, like those things are going to remain unchanged. Revenue, margin, and CAC, like those things will go unchanged. So I don't think there needs to be that concern. I think it's more about how are you going to share with leadership the new metrics that we're testing. And again, like if you're not sure, ask your leaders, because it's a collaboration, and then you don't have to guess, right? You can say, okay, they're interested in seeing how frequently we show up for branded searches. Great, we can pull that information, and then we can articulate what's going on behind it. And then we can refine reports as we go, right? Because I feel like every morning we wake up, there's a new case study, there's new functionality in the platforms that you're using, just providing more and more visibility. So that's kind of fun when you establish kind of these higher level metrics that you're looking at, and then you can really refine and say, okay, we found it. Like this is the thing we're going to track this year. And then setting, goals depending on whatever your business goals are. But that's kind of the exciting thing, is when you can kind of hone and refine some of those metrics that you're tracking until they're really tailored to, this is what we're trying to see.
Do you expect that you might have like metrics like revenue for humans versus agents?
That's an interesting one. It's something I would track, but I'm not sure that at the organization level, it's something that's ready to be integrated. But I think it's one of those expectations or things that you can hint at and kind of, talk to your EDS team, or again, is it to leadership saying like, is there a way that we can segment this data so we can see specifically what's coming from agents and what's coming from humans? So a good call, not something that we're actively working on, but I think for SEOs and marketing practitioners, like that would be extremely valuable.
Cool. And then Will, what sort of signals are you hoping that you can kind of help your customers present, I suppose, to show, if you've got tests, for example, that, okay, this is a positive test?
Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting that the answer to that is often still traffic.
Okay.
And I'm going to loop back around to explain why that is. But the first thing, just to zoom out a second, is to think, I've got opinions on the agent thing. We can kind of come back to that. But if we think of ourselves, how far into the future can we imagine? I don't know, a year or two, right? So 5 years, who knows what flying cars are going to be doing? But a year or two into the future, humans are still the ones who want stuff. I don't think we're going to see a reduction in humans wanting stuff or buying stuff, right? Shopping still a thing. And it's relevant here that we're having this conversation about retailers and e-commerce. And it would be a very different conversation in, say, media, for example, or the affiliate space. There's a lot of different things, different dynamics. But let's speaking specifically in e-commerce and retail for a second. ChatGPT isn't going to ship you a pair of sneakers. So yes, there's all kinds of questions about which surface does somebody check out on? What does checkout even mean exactly? But there is still a retailer and a brand in that dynamic. Somebody's still shipping you the thing. Somebody's still making the thing. And I think that's going to continue increasing, right? I'm bullish on the GDP of the internet, as Stripe would say. And so let's assume that I'm right about that, right? So the GDP of the internet continues to go up. More people are buying more stuff, even if they're AI assisted. How they're going to find that stuff? Well, some combination of things that look like organic discovery, one form or another, right? And obviously there's some paid channels in the mix as well, but it's, as people go hunting for these things, they are searching, they're looking. And at some point that hunting and looking and searching becomes buying. And because the buying has to happen with you in some form, right, the retailer, the question isn't, are these people going to buy stuff? The question is, are they going to buy it from you? And so we're in that. I've always liked the old school name for SEO of competitive webmastering. Right? We're competitive webmastering. We're trying to make it so that people buy the stuff from us instead of from somebody else. And that speaks to, you mentioned being competitive, Caitlin. I think there's a lot of competitors in the SEO world. And so I'm kind of bullish on that ecosystem. When you look at it over multiple years, the number of clicks could do anything. Clicks is basically a vanity metric in that world, right? We could get 10 times fewer clicks and twice as many conversions. There's genuinely, who knows what happens when people are doing all this agent assisted research. And so that's why I say you can't compare a 2023 click to a 2026 or 2028 click. But for an experiment, you can. So our hypothesis is typically by making this change, we will get a measurable, statistically significant improvement in the number of clicks that we're getting. Because over that timeline, over the timeline of a test, that dynamic isn't shifting in the same way. We're measuring most of them in clicks, and then we're converting that into revenue numbers to get close to the business. Typically, we work with our customers' kind of finance teams to work on that, and it depends how far down the rabbit hole they want to go. Of how segmented you make that, how accurately you model it, versus just having an estimated blended revenue per session number across different page types and different channels and so forth. But we're basically trying to report in revenue, but the statistical significance is typically done on traffic, because I've written about this. If you go too far into rankings, you're not measuring everything. You don't get click-through rate. You're not measuring the whole universe of things people search for. If you go too far into conversions and revenue, there's so much other statistical noise around discounts, promotions, special offers, your competitors' pricing, the economy, the interest rates, all kinds of things can affect those kinds of things. And so we're typically measuring and doing the kind of hardcore statistics on traffic. But as I mentioned earlier, we look at that in a kind of multi-metric world, so we can pull in all of those bits of data. But hopefully that makes some kind of sense.
Yeah, I think as well, like, I suppose I'm not really still sold that people will change to this method of, I'm just going to let an agent buy stuff for me. Like, retail therapy is a thing. Like, part of the thing that people like about retail is going and looking and exploring on your own. This idea that you could just, oh, my agent's just gone and bought this stuff, and I had no input in the decision really, other than giving it a prompt. I don't know, not 100% sold that that's definitely the future. But anyway, moving on, because we are running out of time before we get to the Q&A from the audience, and I've got a few more for you. So I wanted to talk about something that e-commerce teams should stop doing, or do less of, because the environment has changed and is changing.
Stop producing mass content that is thin and offers nothing for the user. Produce quality content inspired by what your customers are searching. Think about the user. Yes, of course, we're trying to figure out how AI looks at our content, but we know thin content that is just produced to offer multiple entry points for customers is not the way. Like, that's out, and what's in is dense, informative, helpful, quality content that really resonates and speaks to, again, your users' like pain points, their needs. If they're looking for buying guides, if they're looking for a product comparison, you need to speak to them. Don't just churn out content. So I think I'm not saying don't focus on content. I'm just saying don't use AI to just churn out mass quantities of content that really provide no value. It's going to hurt you in the long run.
Also, we'll think badly of you. We won't be mad, we'll just be disappointed. I was going to say guessing. That's what I want to see people stop doing. I see all of these different ideas about what is or isn't AI ranking factor, and that isn't even a particularly coherent concept, because they're not doing ranking, right? It's not information retrieval really. They may be grounded in or augmenting their data with information retrieval, but that's traditional search information retrieval. So, it was hard enough trying to figure out what the ranking factors were in a pre-AI 10 blue links world. We all played that game and, with varying degrees of success, but throw AI in the mix, throw in the fact that a single prompt might be doing dozens of fan out queries in the background. So it's where you rank across dozens of different queries that you don't even know what they are. And you probably don't even know what the prompt was. And maybe that prompt is unique and has never been typed in before in the history of the universe. This is just an impossible game. You've got to play the science game, and you've got to measure and see what makes the net impact. And obviously, I hope big retailers do that with us, but whether they do it with us or not is that's the bandwagon that I'm gonna keep jumping on. I don't know.
And everything's changing all the time, like you said before. You can do stuff.
But even if it
today,
wasn't, we just have no idea, right? Like it's
Yeah.
so hard to unpick, and I'm not even sure how well it generalizes. I think it's increasingly fragmented and increasingly industry specific, vertical specific, even product specific. So I think a bit of scientific humility.
Yeah, and I was going to say the same thing, Will, about like we're all the experts in our specific business, and don't forget that. So you again can see these case studies. People did these amazing research into how ChatGPT surfaced certain queries and things like that. That's great, but if it's really not resonating with your business goals or your SEO GEO goals, like you need to know that and make the pivots from there. So don't just go out looking at every solution that someone has talked about, because again, too, like that could be completely different tomorrow. But just remind yourself and remember that you're the expert in your business. So what things do you need to apply? What tests do you need to perform? And don't forget that, stay grounded in your business and your business goals.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, right. This is the question that I'm most interested to hear your response for. So, as shopping journeys become more agentic, what becomes the website's job? And does this future tilt towards bigger retailers, or can smaller brands still win?
Do you want to go, Will?
Sure.
Okay.
I thought I had a spicy hot take on agentic commerce, but Patrick, it sounds like you agree with me, which is I think people like shopping, and I think people like buying things, and I think people like PDPs. I like PDPs. I like URLs. I like websites. I like PDPs. And I think we've seen some of this movie before with things like Google Checkout. If you remember the idea that you could check out from the Google search results without even visiting the website, and you can't anymore. And I think that's because people didn't want to. And I think there is a little bit of the retailers didn't want people to, right? Because there's a whole question of who owns the user, where does the data flow, etc. But I think that agentic research is a huge thing.
Yeah.
But the people want to see the thing before they buy it, and the best place to see the thing should be the retailer or the brand own website. What I think agentic commerce most looks like in the short to medium term is fancy Apple Pay, right? I don't want to be filling in the forms. I don't need to do that. I don't need to create an account. I don't need to do any of that kind of stuff. Just, yes, please buy this one. And if there are any questions, my agent can handle those things. So everything after the PDP can become agentic as far as I'm concerned. But I think we go agentic research, PDP, agentic checkout. Who knows how long that becomes true for?
But does that then disqualify anybody not running on Shopify or Stripe, or like the few platforms that might do it? Like, are we going to lose the independent e-commerce?
Well, so it's an interesting question. This is the second half of your question, isn't it? What about the big retailers versus the small? I would be most worried about the medium size. I think there's a place for the massive retailers who can offer something differentiated and sticky, and the whole experience is something that they're kind of renowned for. And there are certain classes of product that I would buy from certain places because I know the brand and I know the experience, and that's built up over time. At the other end, I think there's space for the indie, and whether it's using Shopify, right? And they're still an indie, even if they're on Shopify, right?
Yeah.
So if they're the craftsperson, or they're there's something really human scale about that thing. Maybe they don't even have a couple of SKUs, right? Like they sell one thing. That's fine. That end of things is niche and is differentiated in a different way, because the actual thing they're selling is maybe only available from them, and there's something human about it.
Yeah.
I think it's the undifferentiated middle where you've really got to worry, where maybe you're too big for the Shopify store, but you're not big enough to have built out the agentic checkout yourself.
Or it forces all of those to just go through Amazon or similar,
Yeah, and again, we've seen variations of that movie before. Remember, people like Toys R Us moving onto the Amazon e-commerce platform back in the day, and I think, yeah, well, who knows? But my bet would be a kind of barbell distribution. The big do well and the small do well.
Caitlin, any different opinion on that?
Yeah, so I'm gonna have the hot take here then. I do like shopping, but I hate comparing products. I hate having to search multiple sites. I hate having to have tabs up and see the price here and the discount here. And if I sign up to be part of the loyalty program, I get 10% off here. It's like, that's not it for me. And so I love, ChatGPT shopping. Everything's right in there. I can give the prompt. Patrick, you mentioned like, oh, it's just a prompt, but I'd argue, how good is your prompt engineering? You could get it pretty tailored to show you the exact results that you want. So I think the website then becomes like this layer of trust, right? So if I'm thinking through my point of view, I see all the products, maybe they're from brands that I don't recognize, but I want to click to the site. I'm going to use the website as kind of that gauge. Do I trust this brand? Do I trust this site? And I think this kind of goes back a little bit to some of those foundational SEO things, like, is your site fast, right? And so I think at that point is when websites, like, you really have maybe even a few seconds to shine if someone is reaching your site after doing the total exploration within whatever AI platform. And so I think the website then, it's still for conversion, of course, but it's that moment of purchase. Like, do customers trust you? So that's where I see the website shifting from really this platform to kind of build your journey and help you along your purchase journey, to now you have this glimpse of like, are you a trustworthy site? Do we trust this brand? And are we going to purchase, or am I going to hop back over to ChatGPT, choose a different product, and go through the same process looking at someone else's website? So that's where I think the job of the website changes. And then in terms of the small organizations, kind of as Will was saying, like, they're so niche that they are the experts on their products. And I think that's where they can shine, because AI platforms do reward that type of content, versus whereas some of the bigger organizations or even the medium, they might lean towards maybe some more boilerplate or like customized boilerplate, whereas those small businesses can really get into the nitty-gritty details. And I think they'll be heavily rewarded for that.
Yeah, I think I probably agree with all of that. Although the only part about trust, I suppose, is that for it to be like, I don't know, like true agentic, we'd have to trust that when you go on ChatGPT, you can go and buy me that thing, and that the trust is in the AI platform rather than the website, if you're not going to the website anymore. Which,
Yeah.
I mean, I completely agree with you. I don't like the comparison bit. I also agree with you, Will, that I like to go on the pages and I like to look at the stuff, but I do like the AI coming through and doing that sort of consideration set bit for me, and then going, think about it this way, and you have that back and forth prompt. But if we're going to get to the point where it's doing your shopping for you, the trust would have to be within the platform, and you trust with anything takes forever. It takes a long time to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think ChatGPT is seeing that too with, they rolled back their integration to purchase on directly within the platform. So, and as Will mentioned, like within Google Shopping, like those abilities to purchase right there have been withdrawn, because I think there's something like it's under 50% confidence in like that AI bot checkout. which again, like that's changing human behavior and
Yeah.
trust beyond just like structural. That's like, emotional at that point. But yeah, agreed.
Something interesting. I don't know if either of you listen to the Hard Fork podcast. So this is two tech journalists getting very excited about latest developments in all kinds of technology, but generally AI these days. And I was listening to the latest episode this morning, and they were talking about human taste and there was whether and when these models are going to be good at writing, not necessarily in a can you write me my business email sense, but in a can you write an amazing poem or a novel or whatever else. And interestingly, it's the one thing I've ever heard Sam Altman be like under ambitious about. He was like, maybe in a few years it'll be able to make a poem that's like nearly as good as a kind of the worst poem in a good poet's bit of work, but like not he's not kind of going, oh, it's gonna crush everything like he kind of normally does. And they were comparing that to and some of the kind of crazy stuff you used to get from the early GPTs. So like GPT-2, you would be like, you could ask it, I think the example I gave was I think I might be being scammed. What should I do about this email I've received? And it would kind of hallucinate some kind of crazy otherworldly journey that you might go on, and like we don't get that anymore. All this creativity has been crushed out in the models, and there's something similar. They were talking about it with relation to music. You now actually can get good answers from the LLMs about what different songs are like, and it's interesting because the LLM hasn't listened to the song, right? It hasn't. It's only really consumed things people have said about the song, I assume. And there's something very similar with products, right? It's not gonna these models, they haven't been for a run in those shoes or use that umbrella in the rain or like whatever it might be. And so like there's all kinds of stuff that eventually you could imagine robots doing the testing or something, but like that's a long way off. We're going to get to a very strange place, I think, in a year or two where the model is superhuman in like cognitive ability and still has no sensory perception. And so it's just consuming what, like, again, like reviews, things people have said, but how does it know that it's a person who said it rather than another robot? And that we're entering a very strange timeline. I think I don't have, this is my little like side vibe rabbit hole. I don't have answers to these things, but that's been on my mind today.
I like it. And I don't want to live in a world where I'm reading poems written by bloody ChatGPT.
You think that? You don't know how good the poem could be. I mean, it might blow your mind.
Right. We saved a bit of time for questions, so I'm gonna rattle through some questions from our audience. So let's put one on stage. So we'd love to hear your take on WebMCP and the Universal E-commerce Protocol. Who wants to take this one? Caitlin, you're on mute for a second.
Yeah, you should
Sorry. Well, I'm going to default to you on this one.
No, I was going to say the same thing. So my take is I think it's not the top priority for most sites right now. I would say focus on discovery, not on this kind of the checkout bit. I think there's a lot to be done with smoothing the checkout process. As I said, Apple Pay plus making it so that whatever checkout somebody's using, it's very slick. But I still, as I said before, still a fan of the PDP, still a fan of the URL, and it's probably the biggest thing that I think the frontier models are doing wrong actually right now. My brother's written about this a bit weirdly. It's something that he and I agree on, is that if you go and do a search like query, right, or like put a search type thing into any of the frontier models, whether it's Gemini, ChatGPT or Claude, you don't really get links back. And I think most of the time when you do a search like thing, you want links.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a mystery why none of them have realized this, particularly Google. It's like, dude, just surely you're a fan of the link. And you can get Gemini to do it, or AI mode, which is basically the same thing. you can kind of say, I want links. And if you, the example that I remember my brother writing about was recipes, right? If you ask any of them for a simple, like a tomato soup recipe or whatever, it will give you some kind of weird average slop recipe that's like, the kind of average of all the recipes it's read about, which isn't what you want. Right? You want, and so actually the way to get a good result is to say, give me a list of links and sell me on why I should go and visit those links. And it'd be like, okay, if you're looking for something spicy, go check this one out. The reviews are like, this will blow your mind. If you're looking for something quick and easy to make, check out this one. If you're looking for, I don't know, vegetarian, obviously tomato soup's already vegetarian. That's a bad example, but whatever. It's more creative than me. But have it sell the links to you. That is what an AI search experience should be like, in my opinion. It should be links, and then AI personalized to me, hyper specific to my prompt, reasons why this is the right link for me. Anyway, that's way off topic. I'm supposed to be talking about e-commerce protocols. I didn't. Sorry.
I think you've both answered though that you don't have a big take on them at the moment. Like it's almost like
Wait and see.
Yeah, wait and see. Exactly. See what happens and focus your efforts elsewhere. Okay, so cool. Let's just go on to the next one then. So are there any examples you can share where optimizing for GEO, still hate that phrase, anyway, optimizing for GEO had a positive impact on one channel but a negative impact on another? The
I
answer
can.
could just be no, but
I can kind of. So I'm going to talk around it a little bit with some hints of where we're going. As you alluded to earlier, Patrick, we're going to have some case studies on this very soon. The best examples are still under NDA, and we're working on getting the permission to talk about them publicly. Obviously, the people who are doing the most cutting edge stuff here are not always wanting us to go on podcasts and webinars and tell people all their secrets. The kinds of things that are giving this differentiated impact, positive in one channel, negative in the other, things like adding tons more content to a page, where you can imagine that the LLM is just like, yes, greedy, give me all that stuff, and Google is like, I've seen this before. There's too much on here now. Maybe it's too duplicative of other pages now. They're too similar, etc., etc. So that's just the kind of direction that you can imagine these kinds of things playing out in. I think it's really interesting that the LLMs don't really have a concept of duplicate content. They don't really have a concept of canonical URLs, and they have that in common, as you were saying earlier, Caitlin, with shopping, where all the product variations can all be one canonical URL. But yeah, I saw a product feed recently where 85% of the entries in the feed were one single product that came in like a bajillion variations, and only 15% of it was like the other however many thousand products in the product category. And that doesn't seem to be a problem for paid or other areas. But yeah, anyway, as I said earlier, I'm a fan of URLs, fan of canonical URLs, and I think the LLM should get on board.
you're gonna have to get a tattoo where it says "fan of URLs," I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a winner, Patrick. I might have to run that past the family. Maybe some merch. Should we start with some merch? A hat, something less permanent.
Merch is probably an easier sell. I've got one here, Caitlin, that relates to one of the things that you were talking about earlier. So it's cross-functional collaboration. What's actually working in practice, and how are you systematically turning customer insights from other teams into actionable personas for content and getting buy-in without adding operational overhead?
Sorry, let me catch the. How are you systematic?
The beginning. Sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah. So I mean, this is an interesting one. Of course, there's a lot of different ways you can go. I think in terms of the cross-functional collaboration, it's early there. So in terms of leveraging any information that other teams can contribute, we're still kind of in the conceptualizing phases there. But I think one thing that we're going to look to use strategically is like zero-party data. and finding, are there ways we can get the customers to tell us, share their information, so that way we can come up with what we need to share back. So on the technical side, I'm not quite sure about what that implementation would look like. But again, in terms of getting buy-in, like lean on the relationships that you already have. And I think a lot can be unveiled too in just having conversations, right? Like, I think a lot of times we potentially make assumptions about other departments, or we know what other departments do based on specifically how we interact with them. So maybe open up conversations. They may have data points and information that you didn't even know that they had. So again, I think it's this expectation setting, having these greater conversations to see where there can be shared data, and then actioning from there. So in terms of specific examples, I don't have any quite yet, but it's definitely something, as I've been talking about, that is one of those foundational things that we'll be working on this year, as we continue to build out our strategy.
Amazing. Well, I think that's a nice place to finish up. Circular almost, because that's where we started as well. So yeah, because that's all we've got time for, unfortunately. But thank you ever so much for everyone watching and for those fantastic questions. And huge thanks, of course, to both Will and Caitlin for so generously giving up your time and expertise. We will be emailing out the recording tomorrow. So anyone who's registered, if you missed the start, don't worry, we can catch up tomorrow. Before we go, let me just give you a quick lowdown on Sitebulb's next webinar, which is only 2 short weeks away on the 8th of April. That will be the first of a 3-part series on website migrations, so keep an eye out on your inboxes for details of that. But thanks again for watching, and see you on the next one.